Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. I never expected a quiet Thursday evening to turn into one of those moments that linger, long after the night has ended. The kind of moment that sneaks into your memory, not with a bang, but with a quiet insistence, asking you to examine it over and over. I was sitting on my living room couch, the low hum of the heater filling the room with a gentle warmth, a cup of chamomile tea cradled between my hands. The sun had already gone down, leaving a soft lavender sky that peeked through the living room window. Outside, the branches of the maple tree swayed lightly in the cool breeze, casting long shadows across the floorboards. It was the kind of calm evening that encourages reflection, a pause in the world's endless rush. My phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. I wasn't expecting anyone to call, not at this hour. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in a while, Clara. She's a friend I've known for decades, someone whose presence feels familiar and comforting, yet she has always had this ability to make me pause, to think more deeply than I might otherwise want to. I answered, her voice carrying a tension that immediately caught my attention. "I need your advice," she said, almost in a whisper, as if the words themselves carried weight that I could hear it, the hesitation, the worry, and underneath it, something fragile. "Of course," I said, adjusting my position so I could lean back and really focus on her. "Tell me what's going on." We talked for a few minutes, the kind of light, casual chatter that felt like a warm-up before stepping into something more vulnerable. Clara has always had a way of circling around her feelings, dipping her toes into the water without diving in. But tonight, there was no circling. She took a deep breath, and I could hear the quiet resolve in her voice as she laid out the problem, the question she'd been wrestling with for weeks. It wasn't dramatic in the conventional sense. There were no life or death stakes, no catastrophes. It was something more subtle, more insidious, a crossroads she couldn't navigate alone. She wanted advice, but not the kind that brushed over the surface of things with a few clichés or easy solutions. She wanted honesty, even if it hurt, even if it meant admitting truths that were uncomfortable. As she spoke, I felt that familiar tug of responsibility, the weight of friendship that's grown over decades. I could hear the faint rustle of her movement as she paced in her room, the occasional sigh that punctuated her sentences. I wanted to offer comfort, yes, but more than that, I wanted to meet her in the space she had carved out with her own honesty. I told her the truth, not because it was convenient, not because it made me feel virtuous, but because she deserved clarity. I didn't soften my words to spare feelings, but I didn't lash out either. I spoke with care, acknowledging the complexity of her situation, the mix of hope and fear that clung to her. I reminded her of her strengths, her resilience, the times she had faced uncertainty and found her way through it. Even when it seemed impossible, her response was quiet at first, almost a tremor of surprise. She hadn't expected me to be so direct, yet so gentle at the same time. There was a pause in our conversation, a pregnant moment where the air seemed to hold its breath with us. I could almost hear her processing, turning my words over in her mind. "You're right," she said finally, her voice steadier now, but layered with emotion. "I've been avoiding the truth because I didn't want to face it alone." I didn't interrupt. I let her continue, and in that moment, I felt the subtle shift that happens when someone truly opens up to you. There's a trust there that is hard to describe, the kind that feels like being given a key to someone's inner world and knowing they trust you not to lose it. She spoke about her fears, her uncertainties, her hopes, and in turn, I shared small pieces of my own experiences, not to overshadow hers, but to show her that vulnerability is a bridge, not a wall. By the time we hung up, the room around me had grown darker, the shadows stretching longer across the floor. I sat there, holding my now cold tea, feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction mixed with an odd ache. There's something profoundly moving about being present for someone else in that way, about offering guidance that is both honest and compassionate. It's a reminder that friendship isn't always about laughter or shared memories. Sometimes it's about witnessing another person's internal struggle and standing beside them, even when all you can do is speak truth. As I finally set the phone down, I realized that this conversation had left an imprint on me as well. It had reminded me of the power of listening, of speaking with clarity, and of the delicate art of giving someone the space to confront themselves without judgment. There's a satisfaction in knowing you've helped someone see things as they truly are, and a quiet humility in recognizing that the world doesn't always give us these moments of honest connection, that linger in your mind long after the last words have been spoken. That night, I stayed awake longer than usual, thinking about Clara, about the courage it took for her to call me, and about the subtle, profound ways that truth can reshape relationships. Outside, the wind had picked up, brushing the maple branches against the window in a soft, rhythmic pattern. It felt like a companion to my thoughts, a gentle reminder that life moves on, but these moments, rare, honest, and deeply human, remain with you, quietly shaping the way you approach every conversation, every choice, every connection. By the time I finally turned off the lights, I felt a calmness, a soft clarity that comes from having met someone in the truest way you can. That evening, Clara didn't just ask for advice, she reminded me why honest friendship matters, why it is worth leaning into the difficult truths, and why, sometimes, giving someone the courage to face themselves is the most profound gift you can offer. The memory of that call would follow me for years, a quiet, comforting presence in the back of my mind, reminding me that even in ordinary moments, extraordinary connections can unfold. The morning after our conversation, I woke up with a lingering sense of reflection, the kind that makes you pause before stepping fully into the day. The sunlight spilled gently through my bedroom curtains, painting the walls a soft golden hue, and for a moment, everything seemed almost suspended, as if the world had decided to grant me a quiet space to think. I made my coffee slowly, savoring the aroma and warmth, each sip grounding me as my thoughts drifted back to Clara's words. She had called late the night before, and even in the quiet aftermath of that conversation, I could feel the weight of her vulnerability pressing gently against my chest. She hadn't just come for advice, she had come to be understood. And in being understood, she had unknowingly given me a mirror to examine my own choices, my own fears, and the quiet corners of my life I often overlooked. That I decided to reach out to her again, not because I had more answers, but because I wanted to stay present in the space we had created together. I picked up my phone, typed a few tentative words, and then paused, wondering if reaching out would feel intrusive. But when the message went through, her almost immediate response carried relief, a subtle, unspoken acknowledgement that we were still connected, still holding that fragile thread of honesty between us. "I've been thinking about our conversation," she wrote. "I realized I've been avoiding things that are difficult because I'm scared I might fail, or worse, I might be wrong." Her words resonated in a way that was almost physical. I understood that fear, the hesitancy to face uncomfortable truths, and I knew it wasn't weakness, it was human. I wrote back, telling her that recognizing that fear was the first step, and that taking the next step, even if it was uncertain, was a testament to her strength. I shared a story from my own life, a moment when I had hesitated, when I had ignored the truth because it was easier to pretend everything was fine. I spoke candidly, not to instruct her, but to show her that we are all walking these invisible paths, learning as we go. She responded almost immediately, this time with a vulnerability that struck me deeply. She admitted that she felt alone in her decisions, that even with friends and family, the burden of her choices had felt isolating. Reading her words, I felt a quiet ache, not because she was struggling, but because I recognized how rare it is to find someone willing to speak honestly about the moments when they feel small, uncertain, or fearful. Over the next few days, we exchanged messages, sometimes brief, sometimes long enough to make me set aside whatever I was doing just to focus fully on her words. Each conversation revealed layers of her personality I had only glimpsed before: the way she wrestled with her emotions, the careful way she tried to balance logic and heart, the courage it took to step into her own truth. One evening, she suggested we meet for a walk at the park near her house. The park was quiet that time of day, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the benches and playground equipment. The air carried the scent of early autumn, damp earth, fallen leaves, and the crisp tang of approaching cool nights. I arrived a few minutes early, standing near the fountain, watching the water ripple in gentle patterns, thinking about how often life feels like those ripples, small movements that eventually spread farther than you expect. When she arrived, there was a brief, almost shy smile exchanged between us. Neither of us rushed into conversation immediately. Instead, we walked slowly along the winding path, the crunch of leaves beneath our feet and the occasional chirp of birds the only sounds filling the space. There was a comfort in the quiet, a mutual understanding that words weren't always necessary for connection. But gradually, Clara began to speak, her voice softer than usual, tinged with uncertainty. "I've been trying to figure out what's right for me," she said, "but sometimes I think I'm just afraid of making the wrong choice." I listened, letting the silence stretch just long enough for her to feel it, not rushing to offer solutions. When I finally spoke, I reminded her that life rarely offers absolute certainty, and that the courage to make a choice, to act even when the outcome is unknown, is more meaningful than any guarantee. I shared an example from my own experience, when I had taken a risk in my career, uncertain of the result, only to discover later that the experience itself had been far more valuable than the outcome I had hoped for. As we continued our walk, the tension between us shifted subtly. It wasn't gone entirely, there was still an edge of fear in Clara's tone, but it was softened, replaced with a sense of tentative trust. I realized that these moments, when someone allows themselves to be fully open with you, are fleeting yet transformative. They leave a mark not because of drama or spectacle, but because of the depth of human connection they fostered. By the time we reached the small wooden bridge that arched over the park stream, Clara paused, looking down at the flowing water. "Thank you," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself, "for not just telling me what I wanted to hear." I smiled, feeling the weight of her words sink in. "I think you already knew the truth," I said. "I just reminded you that it's yours to face, to decide, and to embrace, no matter how hard it feels." The sun was almost gone by then, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber. We stood on the bridge for a while, watching the stream below, letting the silence carry its own significance. I felt a sense of peace in that moment, a recognition that we had crossed an invisible threshold in our friendship, one where honesty, trust, and mutual respect had created a bond that didn't need words to validate itself. As we walked back toward the park entrance, the lights flickering on along the path, I felt an unexpected sense of gratitude. Gratitude not only for Clara's courage, but for the reminder that the deepest connections are often formed in the quiet moments when truth is shared, when fear is acknowledged, and when two people simply hold space for one another. It was a walk I would remember long after the leaves had fallen and the air had turned cold, a walk that had shifted something subtle but profound between us, a shift that neither time nor distance could easily erase. The days that followed our walk were quieter, yet they carried a weight that neither of us fully acknowledged. Clara and I continued our conversations, mostly through messages and occasional calls, but there was a new depth to them, a lingering presence of something unspoken, a sense that we had crossed an invisible threshold. It wasn't romantic, at least not in the way most people might expect. It was something far subtler, far more profound. It was the recognition that someone could truly see you, and you could see them, in all your complexity. One afternoon, I found myself thinking about her while I arranged books on my living room shelves. The sunlight streamed through the window, falling on the spines in a way that made the colors almost glow. I caught myself smiling at the memory of her tentative smile on the bridge, the way her voice had carried that mixture of fear and hope. It struck me how much courage it takes to be honest, to speak the truth about oneself to another person and risk judgment, misunderstanding, or disappointment. Yet Clara had done it, and in doing so, she had invited me to meet her in a space I rarely occupy, the place of complete vulnerability. That evening, she called again. Her voice was steadier than before, but there was an undercurrent of emotion I couldn't ignore. "Can we meet tomorrow?" she asked. "There's something I want to show you, something I've been avoiding." Curiosity piqued, I agreed. The next day, I drove to the small art gallery she had mentioned, a hidden gem tucked between two old brick buildings in the quieter part of town. The gallery was intimate, filled with the smell of polished wood and paint, the sunlight filtering through high windows and reflecting off canvases that seemed to capture fragments of time itself. Clara met me at the entrance, her eyes bright but cautious. "This is it," she said softly, leading me inside. "I've been coming here for months, but I've never had the courage to bring anyone. I think I wanted to see if I could be honest with someone about it." She guided me through the gallery, explaining the pieces she had been drawn to, the ones that spoke to her own struggles and triumphs. Some were vibrant and chaotic, others subtle and contemplative. As she spoke, I noticed the way her hands moved, the careful attention in her voice, the light in her eyes when she discussed the pieces that resonated most deeply. It was as if the gallery itself had become a metaphor for her journey, an unfolding of hidden truths, fears, and aspirations, all waiting to be acknowledged. We lingered in front of one particular painting, a swirling blend of dark blues and soft golds. "This one," she said, "it reminds me that even in moments of uncertainty, there's light if you look closely enough." Her words struck me, not because they were extraordinary, but because of their quiet honesty, The way they captured the fragile balance between hope and doubt. I told her I understood, and in that moment, it felt like more than words. There was a shared recognition, a subtle yet powerful connection that needed no explanation. I realized that sometimes, experiences like this, walking through a gallery, sharing reflections, simply being present, could reveal more about a person than any conversation alone. Afterwards, we walked to a nearby cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and the comforting smell of freshly baked bread. We sat by the window, watching passers-by and sipping warm drinks, letting the hum of the street provide a gentle backdrop to our dialogue. Clara spoke of her fears, her hopes, and the ways she had been holding herself back. I listened, offering encouragement, reflections, and the occasional story from my own life to show her she wasn't alone in the quiet battles we all faced. At some point, there was a pause in the conversation, a long, comfortable pause where neither of us felt the need to fill the space with words. I watched her stir her tea slowly, the sunlight catching the edge of her hair, and I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude not only for her courage in sharing herself but for the reminder that the deepest connections often grow in silence as much as in dialogue. As the afternoon waned, we walked back to the gallery to retrieve her things. The sky was painted in shades of soft pink and deepening purple, the streetlights flickering on one by one. There was a sense of closure to the day, yet also the quiet acknowledgement that our journey was far from over. We had touched something meaningful, something that would continue to shape our conversations, our perspectives, and perhaps even the ways we approached life itself. By the time I drove home, I felt a calmness, a deep sense of reflection that lingered in my chest. Clara had reminded me of the value of honesty, of shared vulnerability, and of being present for another person in a way that is rare and profound. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't flashy, it was simply life, in its quiet, transformative beauty. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the day, the gallery, and our conversations. I realized that what we had shared was more than advice or guidance, it was a reaffirmation of the trust and connection that can exist between two people when they are willing to meet each other fully. And as sleep finally claimed me, I felt a quiet anticipation for the moments yet to come, knowing that the journey Clara and I had begun together would continue to unfold in ways neither of us could yet imagine. The following week carried a quiet intensity, the kind that sneaks into your days without announcing itself. Every time I thought of Clara, it was with a mix of anticipation and contemplation. I kept replaying our conversations, our walks, and our moments in the gallery, noticing small details I had overlooked before, the way her hands moved when she explained something that mattered to her, the subtle change in her tone when she spoke about fear versus hope, and the small, almost imperceptible smiles she gave when she realized I understood her. We arranged to meet one evening at the botanical garden downtown. The sky was painted in deep oranges and dusky purples as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the pathways lined with maples, magnolias, and the faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air. It was one of those places where time seems to slow down, where each breath feels heavier with the richness of life, and I knew that this evening would become another memory I would hold close. Clara was already there when I arrived, standing near the rose garden, her figure framed by the soft glow of the setting sun. She greeted me with a smile that carried both warmth and a trace of nervousness, a gentle reminder of the vulnerability she had shown in our previous meetings. We began walking slowly, side by side, following the meandering paths lined with flowers in the late bloom of summer. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began, her voice quiet but deliberate. "About facing the truth, even when it's uncomfortable." I didn't realize how much I had been hiding from myself, mostly. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. There was no judgment in my eyes, only attention and care. "It's not easy," I said, "and it's not supposed to be. The important part is that you're noticing it now." She paused, glancing at a cluster of pale pink roses, and then back at me. "I think that's why I called you in the first place. I needed someone to reflect the truth back to me, someone who wouldn't sugarcoat it but would still hold space for me." I felt the weight of her words, not as a burden, but as a privilege. Being trusted in this way is rare, and I could feel the quiet power of it, the subtle shift in our dynamic that comes from honesty, respect, and the shared acknowledgement of each other's inner lives. We continued walking in silence for a while, letting the sounds of the garden, rustling leaves, distant birdsong, and the soft splash of the koi pond fill the spaces between us. There was a sense of intimacy in the quiet, a gentle rhythm that didn't need words to validate itself. It was in these moments that I understood the depth of connection that could exist when two people truly met each other without pretense. Eventually, Clara spoke again, her voice lower this time, almost reflective. I realized that avoiding the truth wasn't protecting me, it was limiting me. And facing it, even slowly, makes me feel lighter, more grounded. I smiled, deeply moved by her insight. It's like pruning a plant, I said. Sometimes you have to cut away the parts that hold you back, so the rest can grow stronger and healthier. It doesn't happen all at once, but over time, the change becomes undeniable. She laughed softly, a sound that felt like release. I've never thought of it that way. We stopped by a small gazebo, the fading light filtering through the lattice, casting geometric patterns across the wooden floor. Clara leaned against the railing, and for a moment, we just looked out over the garden, the koi pond reflecting the streaks of sunset in its calm waters. I realized that the journey we had been on together through late-night calls, long walks, and quiet galleries had culminated here, in this shared, reflective space. I think the hardest part, she said finally, is learning to trust that I can handle the truth, that I can face it and still move forward. But you've helped me see that it's not weakness, it's strength. Her words struck me deeply, and I felt a sense of fulfillment that was quietly profound. This wasn't about giving advice or providing solutions, it was about presence, understanding, and the slow, transformative power of honesty. I told her that I had learned from her too, that watching someone confront their fears and embrace their truth is a gift that reminds you of the resilience in all of us. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, we stayed a little longer, savoring the moment. There was no rush, no need to fill the silence with words. Just being there, together, witnessing the shift in each other, felt enough. By the time we left the garden, the evening had grown cool, and the streetlights cast gentle pools of light on the sidewalk. We walked to our cars in companionable silence, each step echoing the quiet understanding that our journey had transformed something fundamental in our connection. It wasn't about advice anymore, it was about truth, trust, and mutual growth. Driving home, I thought about how rare it is to find someone willing to meet you in this way, to share space, thought, and reflection without pretense. Clara had shown me the profound impact of honesty, not just in words but in presence, in shared experience, and in the quiet moments that leave an imprint on your heart. That night, as I settled into bed, I felt a sense of closure, not an ending but a completion of a chapter in our lives. A chapter defined by courage, honesty, and the simple yet profound act of being seen. I knew that the memory of this time, the conversations, the walks, the gallery visits, and the garden, would follow me for years, quiet reminders of the power of connection, the beauty of vulnerability, and the enduring strength of truth shared between friends. And as sleep finally came, I realized that moments like these are rare, and yet, when they do happen, they transform you, leaving a quiet, lasting light that shapes the way you move through the world and the people you choose to walk alongside.